Hi everyone. We need to talk about the withdrawal of warmth, or more accurately, professionally sanctioned trauma. I was going to post a jaunty AI generated image of a warmthometer to start you out on this particular journey with me, but that felt frivolous. I've got to say right from the outset here that this debate has once again kicked the mental shit out of me. I come at this from the angle of a mental health punter, an activist of 19 years, a carer and advocate of a similar time frame, and someone who's worked in social care for 20 years, 17 of which as a social worker. Yes, I really am that old. In recent times, in this activist world, I've been trying to encourage people into being more proactive as opposed to reactive, in the hope that we'd be following our own agendas as opposed to those placed upon us by others. Fighting bushfires for all eternity really feels like my definition of hell. But that seems to be where we found ourselves today in the UK. In a recent conversation with the lovely people at Disability Rebellion, they told us that they felt that their time was best used extinguishing the biggest fire. But bloody hell, there are a lot of burning bushes out there. So, quite hypocritically, here's my reactive moment. The withdrawal of warmth. Paraphrasing from a type of therapy called dialectical behavioural therapy, this involves the therapist temporarily shifting from a warm, encouraging demeanour to a more serious, solemn, matter-of-fact or irreverent stance, such as openly expressing frustration, which is referred to as radical genuineness, or highlighting risks bluntly to break cycles where warmth inadvertently reinforces harmful patterns. I'm going to say that again, where warmth inadvertently reinforces harmful patterns. Dialectical behavioural therapy is primarily used on people with the label of personality disorder, more specifically on those labelled with borderline personality disorder. Seems legit, doesn't it? I mean, if you've got a dog who barks every time anyone comes near your door, then you immediately feel that withdrawal of warmth coming on, don't you? Why use it? Well, it's punter approved. The definitive book on dialectical behavioural therapy was written by Marcia Linehan, who 40 years after originally writing about it, disclosed that she had had the condition all along. A reflection that is often used to claim the authentic grassrootedness of the practice. The fact that she didn't share this for 4 decades implies that she knew that the academic world would have probably withdrawn its warmth had it known. It's normal relational stuff, isn't it? If a child runs towards a plug socket with a metal fork in their hand, surely that's a great time to dump all your feely-touchy relational stuff in favour of a sharp, "Christopher, stop that or you'll blow yourself up." Similarly, if a service user insists on burping or spitting in your face, you feel less inclined to sit around a campfire with them and sing Kumbaya. Only, we're not children. We're not barking dogs. I've been working with mental health nursing under and postgraduates for a number of years, using role play to explore what they'd do if they found one of their colleagues working in a way that was clearly prejudicial or discriminatory towards the service users they were charged to support. At a time when, as a punter, I was ready to lay siege to the castle wielding pitchforks and torches in the face of such behaviour, these students have actually increased their feelings and actions of warmth towards those imagined and actual colleagues. Increased, not withdrawn. Hold that thought. Calling in, not out. Their first reactions in a culture where their belief was that these misbehaving colleagues were inherently good was to reach out and ask, "What's going on for you?" These students have consistently shown compassion and empathy for their fictitious colleagues who, like them, are working in a challenging and under-resourced environment where they often feel out of control. For them, the withdrawn warmth of verbal and written warnings followed by dismissal would only come about following a lengthy period of curiosity and inquiry. Let's take a look at the personality disorder backdrop. 80% of those who receive the label of personality disorder have experienced childhood abuse and neglect. I would argue that this figure is far higher if we take into account the massive overrepresentation of autistic people and those diagnosed with ADHD who've often found themselves misdiagnosed into this group. As many of you will recall, this is a bunch of people who were mercilessly bullied at school, while many of us just looked on thinking, oh, thank fuck that's not me. For the past 2 years, I've been involved in a project at the National Collaborating Centre for Mental Health, which is part of the Royal College of Psychiatrists in the United Kingdom, to challenge the ubiquitous prejudice and discrimination experienced by people with the label of personality disorder at the hands of the professionals, structures and organisations charged with our care. As part of the project, I produced and hosted the PD Squared podcast, where PD stands for both personality disorder and prejudice and discrimination, where squared indicates our intention to square up to that prejudice. So far, 100% of the people I've interviewed, both professionals and punters, have witnessed and or experienced prejudice against us. 100%. A huge part of the problem, which is sadly contrary to the lovely intentions of the mental health nursing students mentioned earlier, is the inaction of the good guys, professionals who aren't the perpetrators themselves but who feel impotent to act when they see their colleagues singling us out, calling us attention-seeking, manipulative, divisive, incurable, frequent flyers and similar, and then treating us accordingly. The label is often used as a casual insult for anyone whose views we disagree with, where any American TV cop show you care to mention often makes us the perpetrators of heinous crimes. We are part of a wider group that are being singled out by UK politicians, mainstream and social media as burdens on the state, as they claim we are overdiagnosed leeches of our welfare systems, including benefits, social and healthcare. From the original abuse and neglect, be it childhood bereavement, poverty, physical and or sexual abuse, neglect and experiences of exclusion from our peers, friends and family and professionals, to the ongoing invalidation from the world at large, we are all too aware of the withdrawal of warmth. It's what we've come to know and expect and fear wherever we exist. Dialectical behavioural therapy in the UK isn't dialectical behavioural therapy. As the UK plunges into yet another self-inflicted period of austerity, poor people are being told once again to shoulder the burden of the rapacious greed of billionaires. In April this year, newly disabled benefit claimants will find themselves 50% worse off than their predecessors on lengthy NHS waiting lists for just be fucking grateful therapies, where we're conveniently blamed for our lack of engagement with these non-existent services. The dialectical behavioural therapy model outlined by Marcia Linehan is as rare as hen's teeth in the UK. We're presented with hybridised, shortened, nothing like the thing we were promised in the brochure versions of the therapy, if we're offered it at all. Over 90% of the people with the label will never be offered dialectical behavioural therapy, reconstructed or otherwise. Which brings us back to our earnest professional withdrawing warmth to alter our behaviours. Dialectical behavioural therapy has been rightfully criticised for being overly focused on symptoms such as suicidal ideation and self-harm, and less on the histories that led to them, even though we're told that services need to be more trauma-informed. Studies have shown that self-reported self-harm and suicidal ideation decrease during the period of the therapy. After that, well, it's a research free-for-all that claims everything from no long-lasting benefits to dialectical behavioural therapy being the panacea that saved the world. Real-world studies have shown dropout rates of up to 60% in the community, where, of course, we're blamed for our lack of engagement. I mean, it couldn't possibly be, well, the fault of the services or the professionals, could it? Behaviorism, the study and measurement of human behaviour, was largely debunked as the primary philosophy behind psychological endeavour in the 1960s. Yes, it was measurable, which is exciting for a burgeoning science that wanted to be given the same credibility as the other sciences, but it was ignoring so much of what was going on inside. So, what is it they're measuring? With cognitive behavioural therapy and dialectical behavioural therapy, success is measured in the reduction of organisationally and professionally defined undesirable behaviours, whatever they might be. The imbalance of power is palpable. I may have languished on a waiting list for years. I might be seeing you, the professional, because of some manner of court order. Either way, there's a feeling of desperation on my part to fit in, to conform to the institutional rhetoric. If I don't conform, then it's me and not the system that comes under scrutiny. If I, as a punter, withdraw my warmth from services because of my history of life and of my previous experiences, where many of us discover our diagnosis after looking at our medical notes, where we find we've been discharged by our mental health team who never saw us in the first place, who we know are bathed in personal, cultural and structural prejudice and discrimination. We're mad, not stupid. When nearly half of us are prescribed mind-numbing antipsychotic meds, it is seen as my pathology and not a reasoned response on my part. With up to 60% of mental health nurses leaving the profession after the first year, where services are massively reliant on transient bank staff, where 13,000 posts remain unfilled in mental health services in just England and Wales, enduring meaningful relationships between punters and professionals are positively mythical. So, let's try and clamber inside the mind of the professional. How do they feel as a human being in this out-of-control, often toxic environment? Out of control? Toxic? Are they one of the roughly 50% who've considered leaving their jobs in the last year? Are they one of the 30% who've taken time off work because of a deterioration in their own mental health? Are they affected by the regular cancellations of clinical supervision because their line managers have been whisked away to deal with some crisis or other? Do they, like many of their colleagues, avoid supervision because that shows some manner of deficit in their learning? Or do they see it as a space where they and their colleagues get punished for poor practice? Or worse still, do they see it as a process of rubber stamping, of box ticking, to show that their organisation is meeting their requirements? Why haven't they left? Are they burdened with a mortgage, a family, a car, student debts, the spiralling cost of just existing? Does that make it difficult for them to challenge poor practice when it so obviously presents itself? These people are my tribe. If I call them out, what then? Do I get seen as a troublemaker? What happens to my chances of promotion? What happens the next time I need their support? How do I keep myself safe? How do I then justify my inaction at these times to myself? How do I take back control? Okay, let's look at the deed. Person X has done something that the person in power has deemed undesirable. What next? Okay, hold up. Who decided that these things, whatever they are undesirable? Have you truly co-created an agreement where you've taken the time to acknowledge the power differential in your relationship in formulating this cunning plan? Have you really? Okay, you then withdraw warmth. Does your punter know what you're doing? Do they know why you're doing it? Have you managed to do it in such a way that you don't sound like a fucking narcissistic psychopath? Are you a fucking narcissistic psychopath? In a world where measurable outcomes are key, how much warmth have you removed? 10%? 50%? All of it? How do you measure that on your warmthometer? When does the punter know when the warmth is returning? Do they know what they need to do to get that warmth back? In a world where behaviourism has been scientifically out of favour for more than half a century, what exactly do you think you're doing? What happens if they decide to remove their warmth? Oh yes, we've already established that this would be because they're attention-seeking and manipulative. So this builds a culture of withdrawn warmth. You know, as a mental health practitioner, that a number of your colleagues will misguidedly or willfully misinterpret what you understand to be the withdrawal of warmth. If a punter has pissed them off for whatever reason, that can lead to all kinds of repressed prejudices being released. Suddenly, they'll be justified in brandishing all the old tropes, declaring to anyone who'll listen that they told you that this punter was an incurable, lying, manipulative, attention-seeking waste of space. They're emboldened by the idea of withdrawing warmth to justify all the shitty discrimination that's been festering within them. And it's very likely that their colleagues will watch on in silence, because they're all part of the same tribe, fearful of breaking cover. What effect does this have on the punter? Well, it can be traumatising. If they've agreed to make themselves vulnerable in what you've assured them is a safe environment, and suddenly that emotional rug is pulled away from beneath them, mentally, they suddenly return to that abusive world of their childhood, where fear and uncertainty reigned, where often their only options were to hide, disengage, or at times of real desperation, fight back. If you haven't been incredibly specific about what you're withdrawing and why, the punter will return to that terrifyingly and confusing world where they had no idea which of their behaviours had elicited that sudden wrath or neglect from those charged with their care. They might quite rightfully join the 60% of their peers who've said, "Fuck this for a game of soldiers, I'm out of here," as you carefully write down in your notes, X does not engage with services. Let's talk about your ego. When your punter behaves in a way that you'd rather they didn't, when they burp or spit in your face, what's your immediate reaction? Do you adopt the philosophy of our friendly neighbourhood mental health nursing students, where you assume the person is inherently good, that this behaviour is out of character for them, and then reach out with more warmth and understanding? Or do you take it as a personal slight, where you focus all your years of training and personal sacrifice on this thankless bastard in front of you? Or do you cling on to the wreckage of your fragmented relationship with your chosen profession and organisation by trying to exert some control on this miscreant before you? Health and safety. Sure, if someone spits, swears or burps at you or attacks you in some other way, shape or form, you have every right to keep yourself safe. But that's not the withdrawal of warmth. That's keeping yourself safe. You know there are a zillion ways to do this. Do that. Call it what it is. Keeping yourself safe. Use supervision. Demand supervision. If your punter runs towards a plug socket brandishing a fork, by all means yell out a warning. That's not the withdrawal of warmth. That's yelling out a warning. To conclude, this is not a debate. Withdrawing warmth is re-traumatizing. It's abusive. It's an abuse of power that often reflects your own feelings of powerless and inadequacy. It's a practice that emboldens cultural and structural prejudice. Don't do it.